Look, kind of going off east, got the ridge line, which we don't want to take.
The one going sort of south-southeasterly.
Incidents caused by navigation errors are commonplace, and the importance of hill walkers possessing good navigational skills can't be overemphasised.
Kind of edge really nicely.
Okay.
Good navigation not only helps to make you safer on the hill, it can mean you have a better day out. It's also great fun, and knowing where you are and being able to anticipate your arrival at a pre-selected landmark in poor visibility is very satisfying.
Hey, calm Jerry Vane.
Develop navigational skills incrementally on less serious hills in good weather before choosing more challenging objectives. Before heading for the hills, make sure you have everything you need to navigate effectively. Firstly, the map. In the UK, it will probably be one of the Ordnance Survey maps in either 1 to 50,000 or 1 to 25,000 scale, or a Harvey map in either 1 to 40,000 or 1 to 25,000. Developing the ability to work with different scales is important.
And then we can see Nabscar just ahead of
Yep.
us.
Just up there.
And then the path in
The map has to be waterproof or contained in a waterproof map case. A wet and soggy map is a liability. Fold the map so that you can see the relevant area while still being able to fit it into your jacket pocket. It's important to be able to put the map away, but also get it out again easily, so have a pocket on your jacket which is reserved specifically for your map. Make sure the zip is easy to use with gloves or mitts. Some maps are waterproof and don't need a map case. An elastic band can be used to keep the map compact. A good compass is also essential. It needs to have a large base plate, a magnifying glass, measuring scales, rubber feet for gripping the map, and be usable with gloves or mitts. We also need a way of attaching the compass so that we can let go of it without losing it. A good method is to have a long cord which goes over one shoulder. In this mode, the compass stays out of the way and is accessible for general use. For more detailed work and following bearings, you can slip your arm through to get more manoeuvrability. There are about a dozen skills which we need for navigating around the hills. They're listed at the end of the chapter. We're going to concentrate now on some of the most important ones, which are setting the map, contour interpretation, ticking off features, using the compass, estimating distance, route choice, catching features, and relocating. The Global Positioning System, or GPS, is also covered. Setting the map is the technique of positioning the map so that all the features are lined up with your own location as a central point. What is in front of you on the ground will be in front of you on the map. What is to your left on the ground will also be to your left on the map, and so on. The writing on the map may be upside down or sideways, but that's okay. Having the map set is far more useful in relating the map to the ground than being able to read the writing. Think of the map as a three-dimensional model which you've lined up with the features on the ground. Keep the map set when you change direction. As you turn to face another direction, you must also turn the map to keep it correctly set. It's really your body that moves around the map. In good visibility, you should be able to set the map by eye. Here, Fred is using a track junction to set the map. If identifiable features aren't visible, you can set the map by using the compass. Use the magnetic needle to find north and line up north on the map with north on the ground. There's no need to make any adjustments or bearings with your compass. You're just using the magnetic needle to find north. Contours are key to navigation in hills and mountains. Man-made features, streams and forests can sometimes be unreliable, and even footpaths can be misleading. Contours are lines of equal height which show us the shape of the land. One of the most important skills for navigating in hills or mountains is the ability to create a mental image of the terrain you're travelling over. Here we see a panoramic view of the Three Sisters of Glencoe. With valleys, ridges, slopes and flat areas, the land is quite complex, and this complexity is mirrored on the map. There are only 6 distinct features which are represented by contours, and the trick is to develop a mental repertoire of the various shapes and sizes which these features come in. We will now see these 6 features alongside their representation on the map. Knolls are one of the most useful features. These are represented by ring contours which form a circle around the knoll. There may be just one ring contour for a small knoll, or there could be several on larger knolls. By developing your own mental picture of how big knolls are with different numbers of ring contours, you'll be able to use them as identifiable features as you travel through the hills. Saddles or colls are another very useful feature. There will be ground rising on either side of the saddle. Saddles which are clearly defined are very conclusive features to navigate to. Saddles which are more open and wide may be less useful. Here we see the same saddle from far away and nearby from different directions. Here's another saddle high up on Ben Nevis. Slopes give us 2 useful pieces of information: the angle of the slope and the direction or aspect which it faces. Both these slopes face southwest. The direction or aspect which the slope faces can help us find our location on the map. This is covered in more detail later in this chapter. Ridges come in all shapes and sizes. They're one of the most important mountain features. Imagine the contours on the ground forming a V shape as they cross the ridge. See how the contours make a V shape on the map? Re-entrants or small valleys can provide conclusive information. They often have streams running down them. Imagine the contours on the ground forming a V shape as they cross the re-entrant. See how the contours make a V shape on the map. Sometimes it can be difficult to decide whether V-shaped contours depict a ridge or a valley. If the contour heights decrease in the direction to which the V points, then the feature is a ridge. And if the contour heights increase in the direction to which the V points, then the feature is a valley. If there's a stream running through the apex of the V, the feature is a valley. The last type of contour feature to become acquainted with is a flat area. In the hills, flat areas can be easy to identify because they are conspicuous in the surrounding hilly terrain. Absence of contours depicting a flat area in a predominantly hilly area can provide a useful navigation feature. Ticking off is the technique of continually identifying features on the map which you expect to see on the ground and then looking out for them as you walk. As with many navigational skills, ticking off is a technique which is also used when navigating in urban areas in our everyday lives. Consider following directions in which you have to tick off a shop, a telephone kiosk and a road junction before arriving at your destination. The skill is similar in the mountains. The only difference is the type of features you're ticking off. The compass performs several tasks. It's used for measuring bearings and distances on the map, and it's also a magnetic compass for following bearings when walking. Before taking a bearing, always estimate what the bearing will be. You can then check this against the bearing taken with the compass to make sure you haven't made a basic error. This leg is roughly southeast. To take a bearing, place the compass on the map with the direction of travel arrow pointing in the direction you want to go to, and line up the edge of the base plate with your location and the feature you want to go to. Once the 2 points have been lined up accurately, push down firmly on the base plate to keep it in place, and then turn the compass housing so that the north arrow in the compass housing points to north on the map. Ignore the magnetic needle. Line up the parallel lines in the compass housing with one of the grid lines which point to north on the map. A common error is to line up with the wrong grid lines. This is why it's a good idea to visually estimate the bearing first so that you can check that you haven't made a mistake. The magnetic needle is not used for taking a bearing from the map, so just ignore it for now. It's useful to kneel and use one knee as a table to help take accurate measurements. You've now taken a grid bearing and you can read it at the line, which is in line with the direction of travel arrow. Check that it's the same as your visually estimated bearing. Be careful not to alter the bearing by allowing the compass housing to rotate unintentionally. To follow the bearing when walking, you have to add the magnetic variation. The map will provide the correct number of degrees to add. To follow the bearing, hold your compass in front of you, pointing in whichever direction you happen to be facing. Rotate your body by walking your feet around until the north end of the magnetic needle lines up with the north arrow in the compass housing. It's your body that turns, not the compass base plate. The direction of travel arrow now points in the direction you need to go. Here's a close-up of the compass being aligned correctly. The most accurate way to follow the bearing is to identify small features on the ground which are on your direction of travel. The features you choose need to be between you and the final target you're heading to. Ensure that you don't choose something which is beyond your final target. This obviously requires some visibility, but even in relatively poor weather, there will often be sufficient features which you can still see. The features can be quite close to you, maybe 25 metres. Hold the compass so that you can look along the base plate in the direction of travel and at the same time confirm that the magnetic needle is lined up with the north pointer. Find a feature which lies on the bearing. It might be a rock or a clump of vegetation. Once you've identified the feature, there's no need to use the compass again until you reach it. You can also take any route around obstacles to get to the feature. It's essential to maintain your fix on the feature. It may change in appearance as you get nearer. Once you've reached the feature, then repeat the process by sighting on a new feature. The least accurate way to follow the bearing is to walk on the needle and only use the direction of travel arrow to keep you on the right bearing. It's possible to be accurate with this method, but it does require practice, and most people have a tendency to drift off to one side or the other. There are times when absolute precision isn't necessary because you're following a linear feature on the ground, such as a track or a stream. It's still good practice, though, to take a rough bearing and to use the compass to keep a general check on your direction. This will confirm that the feature you're following is still the correct one and could prevent a major navigational error. Before estimating how far you've travelled over the ground, you'll need to measure the distance on the map between your present location and the target you're walking to. Some people use the millimetres scale, which runs alongside the compass base plate, while others prefer to use one of the roamers, which are measurement scales for specific map scales. Millimetres can sometimes be hard to distinguish, especially in rain or snow. Using the compass roamer may be clearer, although some compasses don't have roamers. Some compasses have detachable measuring slides for different map scales. Estimating distance travelled by timing is based on knowing the speed at which you're walking and keeping a note of when you left your last known point. Walking speed varies and is dependent on a range of factors, including fitness, weight of rucksack, length of journey, wind, conditions underfoot and slope angle. A formula for estimating the time required for a journey was published in 1892 by the renowned Scottish mountaineer W. Naismith. There are numerous variations on this formula, and enthusiasts will discuss at length the merits of different models. However, useful estimates can be made without going into great detail, and most people manage with just one or two versions of Naismith's original calculations. Reasonably fit people walk at 4 or 5 kilometres per hour. The chart shows the times in hundreds of metres. Add 1 minute for every 10 metres of ascent. When going downhill, you can usually ignore the height loss and only use the time for the horizontal distance. If it's a steep descent, you may have to allow for the extra time taken. You need a watch for timing, and it's useful if it has a stopwatch facility, but it doesn't have to be expensive. Pacing is often more accurate than timing, but it requires concentration. An average stride takes about 60 double paces per 100 metres. A double pace is taken every time the same foot hits the ground. You can find out your own individual pacing figure by measuring out 100 metres and then seeing how many double paces you take to cover the distance, or you can do it on the hill between known points on relatively flat terrain. Going up or downhill or walking on rough ground or in deep snow can alter the number of paces you take. You can estimate how many extra paces you need to complete 100 metres at the end of every 60 double paces. It's best to measure the distance in hundreds of metres rather than by working out the total number of paces needed for a particular navigational leg. It's useful to have a way of remembering how many hundreds of metres you've paced. It's easy to forget, especially if someone asks you a question halfway through the leg. Silva make a counter which fits on the side of your compass, or you can use cord grips as counters on the compass lanyard. Don't always expect your timing and pacing calculations to take you right to the spot you're heading for. Look at the ground around you and compare it with the features on the map.
There's a stream.
Can you find anything that doesn't fit? If so, find out why it doesn't fit. Look for other features which do make sense.
Okay, yeah, on the skyline, above the skyline.
Yeah.
And then this must be Blind Cove down here.
Yeah, and then Crag is round the corner.
An effective route utilises navigational features, avoids hazards and is practical to follow. Choose features on the map which are not too far from each other, ideally no more than 1 kilometre, which you'll be able to identify as you reach them.
So that must mean just ahead, so see that dip between it, just really clearly goes down out of sight.
About 200 metres away.
Yeah, and then see stretching out ahead of us, you can see the ridge, it's a flat section of this ridge and then kind of gradually rising up to Great Rig.
Imagine someone has given you directions to their house in a town which you've never been to. What landmarks will they use? They'll probably try to describe the route by referring to features which you will easily be able to find. For example, a pedestrian crossing, a post box, a road sign, a distinctive building, and so on. Transfer this concept to choosing a route in the mountains. Instead of someone telling you what the landmarks are, You look for them on the map and choose features which you'll be able to find.
You probably need to be a little bit careful just coming back through the woods if you want to get back into Rydale. Doesn't seem too...
Here we're looking at a journey from Carnban Moor to Lochnan Crapen. Following this direct line in poor visibility with no features along the way will be difficult. This alternative route is longer, but there are 3 features which can be identified along the way. Following the line shown by the arrow, the slope angle gradually becomes steeper until it suddenly eases off as the ground becomes almost flat. The slope goes down very gradually and then, after a flat section, gently rises up towards the rounded knoll, which is the next prominent feature. A track is shown going over the knoll, which may also be prominent. If the ground starts going down again, you'll know that you've missed the knoll. The downhill slope is called a catching feature. The route now utilises the track, and even if the track is not significant, the route chosen will take us to the prominent re-entrant or small valley which the stream flows down. This will be easy to identify because of the V-shaped contours. Here's a good example of contours on the map being used to identify features when hill walking. The final leg goes up slightly and then drops down to the loch. Although there is some height gain on this route, the spur which we have to go over is a useful landmark, and the overall route choice is likely to be more effective than going in a straight line from Carnban Moor. Being able to select an appropriate route and then follow it using the other skills which have been outlined can be very satisfying, great fun, and most importantly will help you have successful days out on the hill. Catching features are features in the landscape that will tell you if you've overshot your target. In this example, the route goes over Scorrindú Moor en route to Scorgoye. Scorrindú Moor is an important feature to aim for along the way. If you find yourself going downhill before you've identified the summit, you know you've gone too far. The downhill slope is the catching feature in this example. Here the route heads up to the foot of a ridge and then turns to climb the ridge. If you miss the foot of the ridge and the turning, you'll reach the stream and the valley it flows down. This will tell you that you've overshot the turning. Remember that streams are not always reliable features because there might not be any water running in them. It's often the contour feature which a stream flows down which is most significant. Some streams flow down significant features, but many of them don't, so always check the contours. The stream and the valley it flows down are the catching feature in this example. Catching features should be identified before you set off for your target. Timing and pacing can also be used as mental catching features. The red dotted line shows the intended route to descend from the summit of Stob Jarrag on Buccleuch Moor. A crucial feature is the col at the head of the corrie where the route turns north. It's possible to stray off the bearing and end up on the wrong side of the ridge. Relocating is about stopping to sort things out.
Hang on, Ben. I'm not sure about this.
Okay, well, let's stop and get the map out and then just double check it then.
Yeah. We're going completely in the wrong direction.
Okay. Can you just, what sort of direction is this slope going off in?
South? We're meant to be
Okay.
going west.
Okay. Oh, I see what we've done. We've come down the ridge, the wrong ridge. Okay. So what we need to do is make sure we can backtrack or find a way of getting back onto the original route, which was west, that direction.
The best option here was to retrace their steps back to the ring contour and then follow the bearing more carefully.
Okay, to that direction.
This is another false line which is sometimes taken by mistake. If you don't pay attention to the bearing, it's very easy to end up going completely the wrong way, and the remedy will often require you to go uphill before being able to descend by the right route. Fred and Ben used slope aspect to relocate. Even in its simplest form, it's a very useful tool. Just by using the points of the compass, north, east, south and west, you can work out which direction the slope you're on is facing, and then look at the map to find the slope which faces this way. Slope aspect can be used more precisely by taking a bearing of the direction in which the slope faces. Let's imagine we've become disorientated somewhere within the area shown by the map. We know we haven't gone far and we're somewhere within this circle of map. We've taken a bearing of the direction in which the slope we are on drops away. There can be slopes of very different directions all located within a small area. The task is to find out which slope you're on. Let's assume the bearing we took of the slope on the ground was 30 degrees. Place the compass on the map in the rough area where you know you are. You've already got 30 degrees set in the compass because you've just taken the bearing of the slope direction. Without moving the compass housing, turn the whole base plate until the parallel lines in the compass housing line up with the grid lines on the map. Move the compass around the area you're in until the edge of the base plate is at right angles to the contours of the slope you think you're on. This is the slope which you've identified. Usually there will only be one slope in the area which you're in which faces a particular direction, and so this gives you some quality information about your likely location. There's no need to worry about the magnetic variation because the bearing you've taken on the ground is only approximate anyway. The Global Positioning System, or GPS for short, can be a very useful navigation aid for hill walkers. It's important to recognise, though, that GPS cannot substitute for the core navigation skills, especially contour interpretation and route choice. The most obvious benefit of GPS is the possibility of obtaining a grid reference of your position. Most GPS receivers provide a reference that refers to a unique 1 metre square on the map. On the British grid, this will usually be 2 grid letters followed by a 10-figure grid reference. Many handheld receivers aren't accurate to 1 metre, but even 10 or 20 metres accuracy is pretty good for navigation on the hills. The GPS receiver needs to have line of sight to at least 4 satellites, and the more satellites it can access, then the more accurate it'll be. Anything which obstructs the line of sight will reduce accuracy. The obstruction might be a cliff, a steep-sided valley, or trees in a forest. Using a GPS to locate your position on the map is obviously a very useful aid, especially if you've become disorientated or in an emergency. The ability to use grid references is vital because this is the only way you can translate the position which the GPS provides. When folding the map into a map case, the printed grid numbers need to be visible, and if not, then you need to write them on the map with a pencil so you can see them. When using the British grid system, you need to know the 2-letter prefix which identifies the specific 100 kilometre square you're using. An easily made mistake is to forget that the letters change every time you reach the 00 grid numbers, and this often occurs within one map sheet. A classic example of the potential for hill walkers to cross 00 grid lines and therefore walk across areas which have different grid letters is the 4 squares with grid letters NH, NJ, NN and NO. These grid letters cover a major part of the Cairngorms. Where 2 grid lines both numbered 00 cross each other, there will be 4 adjoining map areas, each with its own specific 2-letter prefix. The 6-figure grid reference for this location is NJ 000 000. The GPS receiver has to be formatted to match the map datum and position format for the map you are using. On British maps, this is likely to be Ordnance Survey and British Grid, but always check the map which you're using. The correct time zone also needs to be allocated. Another useful feature of GPS receivers is being able to enter the grid reference of a location you want to go to and then following the arrow on the receiver in much the same way as you would follow a compass bearing. Remember that following a GPS bearing could take you over a cliff and that using a GPS receiver is not a substitute for map reading and route finding skills. It takes time to key in grid references and it's useful to do this before going on the hill. Grid references are not needed for navigating with map and compass. If using a GPS receiver, they are essential because grid references are the interface between the GPS and the map. The other time when the ability to work out a grid reference is needed is when there has been an incident and you need to pass on your location to someone else, possibly a mountain rescue team. Most maps include instructions on how to work out a grid reference, and it's wise to spend some time making sure you know how to do this before heading for the hills. Software is available which makes it easy to create routes and waypoints. Once you've created a route on the mapping software, you can load it into your GPS receiver in seconds. Here we see a 3D fly-through of a route which has been created on the mapping software. It's important not to become totally reliant on the global positioning system. You might run out of batteries or have some other difficulty with your receiver. Always take a map and compass.